Today, we're tying a version of our friend Russ Maddin's classic Circus Peanut. This is a smaller variation of a fly we love to throw for trout when water temps are on the cooler side. Hey everyone, Matt here with the Northern Angler in Traverse City, Michigan. You can find all the materials you'll need for this fly and lots more at thenorthernangler.com. I really like to downsize my streamers in low clear water like we've been experiencing the past few years. The vertical jigging action of this fly in the water lends itself to a slow, methodical retrieve that fish really respond well to. With your hook securely in the vise, start your thread right around the midpoint. Here we're just taking loose wraps, create a basic thread base, and we're working right on back to where the thread will intersect right there with the barb. Trim your excess, and then we're going to grab two different colors of marabou. We're going to layer the tail here. To prep these, I'm pulling down some of this fluff off the base of the feather. And then I'm sliding that through my thumb and index finger, kind of to just taper that thing down. I'm going to measure one shank length, that is from the eye back to the bend. Hop it back, loose wrap, tension, tension, tension. There we go. And that keeps it right on top of the shank, as you can see there. And we'll just grab our second color. You can prep these at the same time and align them if you like. I find it's plenty fast to do it this way. Doesn't have to be perfect. Measure this one right up against the tail you've already tied in. And they should be almost exactly the same. Again, loose wrap, just so it doesn't spin, loose wrap, add tension. I'm going to wrap back towards the barb with this. Put a few wraps on the shank, keep it from spinning. And then with my left hand, I'm going to tension these just so they're not loose as I work my way up the shank with some open wraps. And I want to save myself some space near the front because I need some room for the rubber legs and the hackle feather we're going to tie in. Just come back over this. Doesn't have to be pretty. We just want to compress that marabou a little bit. And now we have a nice two-toned tail. I'm going to tie in, before anything else, I'm going to tie in a little piece of tippet. This is 5X because that's what's on my desk right now. And this is going to serve as a rib. So we're tying this in just like it was maybe a piece of wire. But tippet works great for this as well. Place the excess in that material clip, keep it out of the way. And then we're going to dub a really thin body. You could use chenille here if you like. I think dubbing is nice because you can really easily control how thin it is. We don't need a whole lot. I just want to cover up those wraps of the marabou. Fairly tight noodle here, working forward. Don't worry about ultimate coverage here. We're just trying to cover the basis of this up. Okay, looks great. Again, I've saved myself about an eye or two length up front. That's so I can tie in my hackle feather. I'm going to prep this by, again, stripping down some of that fluff off the stem. You just don't need it. And then I'm actually going to tie in at the stem. I use about a 45-degree angle with this stem placed against the shank of the hook. And then I am not worried about rolling over. I'm getting lots of secure wraps on it. Once you've got that tied in, add a half hitch or two. And I'm going to use the rotary function on my Renzetti. With hackle pliers, grab the top of that stem, and then you can start to rotate. You want to make sure you get one really good wrap up at the head of the fly before you start taking nice, large, open wraps back. Try and keep things evenly spaced. The fish aren't really going to notice how perfectly spaced these are, but you will, and you'll feel good about it and confident headed to the water. capture that with your tippet, and I'm just working it through, counter wrapping, so it's going over the stem all the way back up to the eye. Grab your thread, put a few wraps on top of that, a few wraps in front, trim it, and things are starting to come together. We're going to add one silicone leg per side here. I like to fold these. And then you want plenty of tension. That way you're not getting all those legs bunched up near the head of the fly here. Same thing on the other side, just fold, rotate this, easy access. Plenty of tension. Wrap over that, and you're trying to orient these legs back. That's the whole idea. You can tie them in securely all you want, but I want them swept backwards without having to work too hard at it. Whip finish off. You can use some adhesive here if you want. I'm just going to do 2 whip finishes. Should be plenty secure. Now we need to trim these legs, and one trick I like to use, if you're worried about getting consistent leg length, is put your hook in the vise like this, so you can use gravity as your friend. And I'm trimming these legs about even with the marabou. Last thing we need to do on this fly is come in and trim the remaining tip of that feather. And really, you've got a woolly bugger here, and that's the whole back of this fly. We're going to prep the connection to the front hook with some thick mono. And I'm going to add 2 beads to separate the front hook from the back hook. And you want to pull pretty hard on this mono, kind of set it in its spot. And then you can just leave the fly kind of like that. You can do a bunch of these back halves and have them all prepped and ready to go. It can really speed up the production process if you're tying a bunch of these. That front hook locked in. We're going to start the thread right at the eye this time. We want to create a bit of a thread base for these eyes. It's just going to help keep them from spinning, and they're going to stay in place. The real important thing here is that you place your eyes about 2 eye lengths back. It's a little bit further than normal for most flies, but we need to have space to wrap this very chunky chenille. And we're tying to the underside. I do about 8 crisscross wraps in each direction. And then I repeat, and then I start working underneath and side to side. And you end up with a pretty well secure pair of eyes. From there, we're going to create a nice thread base so that mono doesn't want to slip around. Work right back to the start of the bend. And that's our tie-in point. Grab that back hook. Make sure your mono hasn't twisted too much. It's going to twist. That's just how it is. This is pretty important. My first wraps are very loose. That way I can slide the back hook up and down and really fine tune the size of that loop. I'm going to wrap back to the beads. That way, just enough where this thing moves about. Wiggles. We want some wiggle. Work on top of that. I'm just going to trim this so it's easier to work with. up to the eyes. And if you really want a secure fly, double it back. You can add some adhesive if you want, but you'd be surprised how strong just some really good thread wraps are. Work back to the tie-in point, and we're going to grab another feather, but we're going to tie in by the tip this time. Work that up. It's going to be messy. It's okay. We're going to dub right over the top of this. We're doing this just because this gets all totally covered up with marabou. It doesn't need to be, you know, perfect. It's not going to get as mangled maybe as that back hook. So again, a thin dubbing noodle, just covering this up. And we're not going to wrap all the way to the eyes here. We need to save space for 2 wraps of marabou and some silicone legs. So spacing, even though this is a bigger fly for some of you, is still very critical for success. Grab that feather. We're not going to use the rotary function here. We're just going to manually do this. It's good for you. We're wrapping this up, and this is essentially a wing on a fly. It's designed to support the marabou that we're going to wrap in there. Capture, 3 wraps, 3 in front, tie that off. Looks pretty good. I'm going to wrap back on top of that feather just to really secure it down and make a nice spot for that marabou we're going to tie in next. We're again going to use 2 different colors of marabou for the wrap, and I'm going to prep these in a very similar way to the tail. And I'm concentrated on stripping some material off the stem. That's because it just makes it so much friendlier to work with. And I only need 2 wraps. So I'm really focused on the mid portion of this feather right here. Set these 2 together. Hopefully you have similar length feathers. If not, lay the sections you're going to use together and really work to expose that tie-in point. You don't want it to be too messy. You want it to be as clean as possible. We're going to tie them in together. Come in and trim that. Make sure those are really secure. You really need to tension both stems. I like to wet my fingers for this step and preen everything back so that I can add tons of tension and not trap too many fibers. Just going to help for the blend. There's 1 wrap. Like I said, we're shooting for 2. There's 2 wraps. You can use hackle pliers here if you want. Part of the advantage of stripping down to the stem is it makes it a lot easier to handle with just your fingers. There's that. We can comb those out and blend them together here. I'm going to add the exact same setup with the legs to the front here, where I'm folding 1 on each side. Rotate this, fold, bring it right up, tension it, and I'm wrapping back on top of that leg. Helps orient it rearward. All right, we've saved ourselves a nice bit of room towards the front. So now we can tie in this Life Flex chenille. You can also use the Badger Squishenille. Works well. A little bit darker core. And the goal here is try not to trap too much marabou. With those legs, want to hang on to it really bad. So I'm going to do 1 or 2 wraps behind the eyes if I can. I think I can get away with it this time. And then I'm going to go over and under in a diagonal manner over those eyes. I'm catching a bunch of marabou too, that's okay. And I want to go 1 full wrap in front. Bring it up, capture it. Come in and trim your chenille off. It's looking good. And because we gave ourselves so much room, 2 eye lengths, this is going to be a breeze to tie off. You don't have to struggle and push all that material back. I'm going to do 2 whip finishes. Come in, trim that off. And then there's one, I trapped 1 little rubber leg. Of course I did. That happens, that's okay. Fish won't mind. From here, we're just combing and preening everything out. Those legs, there's really no need to trim. I like to keep them almost full length here so they end up near the tail. Well, I hope you get a chance to tie a few of these up and try them out on the water this year. Be sure to check out the links below for a full material list and an article about the rigging we like to use for this fly. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I have a lot of fun putting these together, so I hope they've been helpful. If you'd like to see more videos like this, think about hitting that subscribe button. Get tying, everyone. Hopefully I'll see you soon in the shop or out on the water.